Among the clans, only Clan Ghostbear looks upon its founders as parents of a great family. When the clans expanded following their successful campaign to retake the Pentagon worlds, and again when Nicholas Kerensky instituted his ambitious program to genetically engineer warriors, Clan Ghostbear lost a certain degree of closeness simply because of its size. Before the invasion started, however, Bear warriors managed to maintain close personal ties to their trothkin long after leaving the Sibco. Also, because the Ghostbear warrior caste structure is less military and more fraternal than most Inner Sphere units condone, the Ghostbear units developed fierce loyalty and shared close bonds of friendship and trust with one another. This intimacy also fostered a more informal command structure than that of other clans, which is exactly what founder Hans Jorgensen intended. Commander Jamie Wolf from an unpublished Clan Invasion War Journal. Now is the time to prove what we know to be true, that we shall conquer all. The Remembrance, Clan Ghostbear, Passage 155, Verse 2, lines 45 through 48. Of the four original invading clans, the Ghostbears could be described as an outlier among equals. They weren't as aggressive as the Smoke Jaguars, they lacked the bravado and arrogance of the Jade Falcons, and they weren't the scheming manipulators that Clan Wolf turned out to be. They were something altogether different, and yet still appeared to be quite alien-like as the Ghostbear Tumen descended upon the worlds of the Free Rosselhog Republic in the early days of Operation Revival. Following the capture of the Explorer Corps jumpship Outbound Light, the clans that were dominated by Crusaders demanded immediate action. A rallying cry for an invasion of the Inner Sphere was opposed by the Warden Khan, Ulrich Kerensky of Clan Wolf, who called for a trial of refusal when they lost the vote in the General Council. The Ghostbears ended up wrapped up in this as both their Khan and Sakhan chose to fight on the trial on behalf of the Crusaders. Though Clan Wolf lost the trial, Khan Kerensky ended up killing both Nornian Tseng and Ursula Jorgensen in the fight. Because of course he did. Remember that even when Clan Wolf loses, they really win. Go ahead and write that down. It'll improve your understanding of the next 100 years of clan history. The Ghostbears recoiled, and when a new Khan and Sakhan were chosen, each was more politically moderate. Karl Borjon and Teresa del Villar ended up guiding the Ghostbears into Operation Revival with a tempered vision of possible outcomes. It should be noted that of the four initial invading clans, the Ghostbears brought the smallest stock of replacement parts and supplies. This was partially due to confidence in the invasion being wildly successful, and in consideration to the burden taking more would have placed on the Ghostbears left behind in the clan homeworlds. After much debate and typical clan demands to be the first to conquer a planet, the Ghostbear Khan decided that the three Ghostbear galaxies would each claim a separate continent of the planet Thule. Though many assume the early victories of the clans in the first weeks of the invasion were all easy, the Rosselhog defenders on Thule fought ferociously and used their environment to their advantage to incur heavy losses on the Ghostbears. Even after being forced to retreat, the Rosselhog defenders did so in good order and lived to fight another day. This would become a running theme for the Ghostbears, who found themselves consistently having to backtrack and retake planets that shrugged off the Ghostbear garrisons left behind when the fleet moved on. The clanners were simultaneously frustrated and horrified by the willingness of the local populations to undertake guerrilla actions and employ scorched earth tactics. Ultimately, Khan de Valar was killed on the battlefield, and her replacement, Khan Bjorn Jorgensen, was forced to request help from Clan Steel Viper to garrison troublesome planets, lest the whole Ghostbear corridor advance grind to a halt. In the first two waves, the Ghostbears had only captured 8 worlds, while Clan Wolf claimed 16. The Smoke Jaguars could boast of taking 15. Though all of the invading clans had to learn the hard way that Operation Revival was going to be much more difficult than expected, the Ghostbears had to eat a significant amount of crow. One of the consequences of a troubled invasion was the extensive use of second-line battlemechs normally relegated to duty far from the front lines in initial combat drops. As amazing as the newest Omnimechs were, there simply weren't enough of them to secure victory. Now it should be noted that, as we're going to see through the course of this video, that the designation of second line doesn't convey a value judgment outside of that of the snobby clan warrior. Some of the most cherished and popular battle mechs of the era are actually considered second line, and they've earned it through some very powerful builds. The 100-ton Kodiak is a great example of successful form and function, which really set the stage for later totem mechs that would come in the decades following its design and construction. First stomping off the production lines in 3001, the Kodiak was a significantly newer design than the other second-line mechs, which had fallen out of fashion among clan warriors who wanted their shiny new Omnimechs. Still, the need was there, and clan Ghostbear scientists did their best to create a multi-purpose assault mech that could approach the power and flexibility of the Executioner. Weighing in at 100 tons, the Kodiak was intended to be a conflict ender. The massive 400XL fusion engine, which weighed in at 26.5 tons, allowed the massive mech to reach a max speed of 65 kilometers per hour. This wasn't going to break any records, but it could follow up on heavy mechs and could outpace many other assaults. The Kodiak's 17.5 tons of compound 12A2 standard plate armor provided slightly less protection than the Atlas or King Crab, but opportunity cost spares no one, not even the Ghostbears. The larger engine and strong weapons of the design had to be paid for somewhere. On the bright side, the armor configuration was done with style in mind, creating a fearsome Ursine appearance which would appeal to Ghostbear warriors for over a century. The original Kodiak lacked jump jets, but the designers attempted to make up for it with a plethora of weapons that could be brought to bear on the mech's targets in the medium and short ranges. That's not to say the Kodiak was defenseless at long range, though. The Series 7K ER large laser offered impressive damage for anyone who thought they could keep the Kodiak at range. While not overwhelming, it did make the strategy imperfect. At the mid-range, 8 Series 2A ER medium lasers were capable of tearing even other assaults apart with a possible 56 damage without getting any other weapons involved. And the Kodiak's 20 double heat sinks made it possible to keep that fire up for several turns while on the run before heat became an issue. If all of that wasn't enough to give an opponent pause, once a Kodiak closed in on its target, it could bring its Series 2 Ultra AC-20 autocannon and its 2 tons of case-protected ammunition into play. And by play, I mean ripping mechs apart like they're piñatas at a 7-year-old's birthday party. Double firing either of the shots from the massive weapon were enough to take down battle mechs, especially if the target was softened up by the longer range weaponry on the way in. More than one Inner Sphere mech warrior saw their end in front of a looming Kodiak. Then finally, to add missiles to injury, a pair of Streak short-range missile 6 racks were added to the left torso along with 2 tons of case-protected ammunition. If the Kodiak was able to achieve a lock, those 6 SRMs, or even 12 if both achieved lock, could devastate lighter mechs that thought they could sneak up close for some free hits on the slow assault mech. Basically, the moral of the story with the Kodiak's loadout is that there's no safe and easy way to counter it. You must face the gazebo alone. A full alpha strike from the Kodiak was not advised in all but the most extreme of circumstances, as it overtaxed even the 20 double heat sinks. Firing everything anyway left the Kodiak at 27 heat into the red, which risked shutdown and ammunition explosions. Not great when you're packed with 2 tons of AC-20 ammo. Of course, we couldn't possibly forget the Kodiak's battle fists, which add to the overall menacing look for the battle mech. After all, what is a bear without its claws? Just a quick reminder for those who don't often use battle mech quirks that the battle fists, or claw-like protrusions of the Kodiak, offer a -1 modifier to hit in combat. That's a more accurate 10 damage, which might not sound like much, but remember you're rolling on the punch hit location table, which can be quite scary if your opponent enjoys not being rendered into a fine paste inside their ruined cockpit. With a strong combination of weaponry, a distracting and intimidating look, and all the swagger that could possibly be poured into a single battle mech, the Kodiak had a lot going for it. Bringing up the rear of the star was Breedfelt's Kodiak, whose claw-like fingers almost touched the ramp as he descended. The Kodiak was not really a frontline mech, but Breedfelt had been on the design test team and had virtually lived inside the mech for over 3 years. It was the kind of experience Angela could never hope to duplicate with mere training. Roar of Honor, page 55, by Blaine Lee Pardoe. Production runs on Ghostbear lines predictably went to support the clan's Tumen. though it does need to be noted that the mech wasn't jealously guarded like some other clan exclusive designs. Either through trade, salvage, or won in trials, the Kodiak was spotted in the tumens of other clans like the Snow Ravens, Cloud Cobras, and Goliath Scorpions. The Ravens could boast of fielding quite a few Kodiaks as a result of their aid in moving clan Ghostbear assets into the inner sphere. As we move down the timeline, the connection to the Ravens will come in handy, keeping the legacy of the Kodiak alive. From all available reports, the Kodiak outperformed expectations. In several sources, including Brian Young's Foxtails, the Kodiak is referenced with near panic levels of fear from the members of the plucky mercenary band. Even without its AC-20 ammunition, the Kodiak is fearsome. The mech also made its mark on Tukayyid as one of the 9 clan assault mechs spotted during the trials against Comstar. Unfortunately, it was disappointing to dig back through the Tukayyid compilation of short stories and not see a single mention of the noble Kodiak. Clearly an oversight. Someone should write a letter. At 100 tons, the Kodiak nearly outclassed the entire Fox Patrol. The giant mech was taller than everything at Katie's disposal, not to mention better equipped and much more heavily armored. The Ultra AC-20 autocannon jutting from its left torso could blow any single one of them to pieces in a single shot. Just the thought of it filled Katie with a distinct feeling she'd gotten into the wrong line of work. The Fox and the Bear, Shrapnel number 7, page 65, by Brian Young. As the clan invasion morphed into a long-term occupation of planets they already held, second-line battle mechs like the Kodiak became crucial in clinging to the clan foothold above the truce line. As local populations tested boundaries and wannabe liberators arrived in system, the second-line mechs had to step up and face down the threats. During the first Combine Dominion War starting in 3063, Inner-Sphere forces from the Al-Shain military district sought to liberate not just the planets formerly held by Clan Smoke Jaguar, but also sought to decapitate the leadership of the Ghostbears. It was during this conflict that a new version of the Kodiak was first spotted. Deemed the Kodiak 2, this version of the battlemech shares a lot of the original's loadout, but is much more restrained in order to find enough mass for the installation of 4 jump jets, pushing the movement profile to 464. The UAC-20 still sat in the right torso along with its 2 tons of ammunition, and the ER large laser remained in the center torso. The remaining weapons from the original loadout were split in half to make room for those jump jets. That left 4 ER medium lasers split between the arms, and just 1 Streak SRM-6 placed into the left torso, along with 1 ton of case-protected ammunition. The end result with the Kodiak 2 was a trade-off of some firepower, which was often more than could be fired anyway, in exchange for the added agility of 4 jump jets. Personally, I think this is not only an acceptable trade, but a preferred one. Even with 4-6 movement, the Kodiak was vulnerable to being isolated from allies and picked apart by lighter, faster foes. With jump jets, that plan is much less viable. The Kodiak opened up on the Falconer with everything available to hit at that range, which made for a very impressive display of firepower. The mech thrust both fists forward, bringing the hand-mounted medium lasers to bear. Of the quartet mounted in the right arm, 3 hit. The trio of beams slashed armor from all across the Falconer's torso from right to left. The left arm beams also achieved 75% accuracy and vaporized armor on the Falconer's left breast, arm, and leg. Grave Covenant, page 234, by Michael A. Stackpole. Now, those of you who are already experts on the Kodiak and where variants fall on the timeline might be gnawing on the edge of your desk, wanting to point out that we've already screwed up the order. Yes, technically the Kodiak 5 dates back to 3052, so I suppose we should go cover that next. It's not going to get any less confusing as the Kodiak 4 also shows up 2 years before the Kodiak 3, so buckle up, Buttercup. The Kodiak 5 retained the 460 movement profile and the 17.5 tons of armor, but boosted the overall number of double heat sinks to 23 to cover for a more energy weapon-focused build. The UAC-20 along with the Streak SRM-6s were removed in favor of a Gauss rifle in the right torso and a second ER large laser placed into the left arm. The designers also apparently determined that if 8 ER medium lasers split between the arms was good, 9 would be even better. So there's an additional laser added to the right arm. The Kodiak 5 had an even worse issue with heat buildup than the original. The 3 extra heat sinks don't really do much when the new weaponry generates an additional 17 heat. Still, you could fire all of the ER medium lasers while on the run and only end up 1 into the red, plus 2 if you fire the Gauss rifle as well. If this variant has any other additional weaknesses, it's the installation of that Gauss rifle into the right torso. While the side torso is protected by case, the Gauss rifle's 6 critical hit locations offer a tantalizing target for incoming fire. A Kodiak with 2 engine hits and down roughly half of its offensive weaponry would not last long in the thick of it. For a fraction of a second before Hal hit his own jump jets and pushed his Kodiak into a series of great bounding leaps, he saw the Atlas standing there like an avatar of death, limned by the yellow-orange light of the fire. Instead of the Kurita Dragon Hall expected, the mech sported a different insignia on its left shoulder. A twisted tree, its dark limbs heavy with pink blossoms. Of War and Peace and Cherry Trees, Part 1, Battlecore, page 22, by Stephen Mohan, Jr. Scrambling down the timeline to 3066, the Kodiak 4 stomped onto the scene. 4 of the ER medium lasers were retained from the original and were evenly split between the arms. They were joined by a pair of LRM-20 launchers aided by Artemis 4 fire control systems. Finally, an LB-20X autocannon was added to the right torso, fed by 2 tons of ammunition, 1 in the right torso and 1 in the center torso. This ammunition-dependent Kodiak was much more of a fire support build than a close-in brawler, partially due to the 6 tons of very explosive ammunition in its torsos, but also because the build required the removal of the hand actuators from the mech, meaning no more battle fists. 2 years later, the Kodiak 3 was produced by Clan Snow Raven, who sought to update the much-appreciated mech to better fit within their tumen. Much like the Kodiak 4, 4 of the ER medium lasers were retained in the arms, but the rest of the available mass was spent on a targeting computer in the left arm and a pair of LB-20X autocannons split between the side torsos. This required pulling 6 of the double heatsinks as well. Each of the LB-20Xs was fed by 3 tons of ammunition. With 15 shots per autocannon, the Kodiak 3 was both ammo-dependent and vulnerable at long range due to its inability to hit back until within 15 hexes. Additionally, with 2 tons of ammunition in each case-protected leg, a savvy opponent could focus fire in hope of crippling the battlemech quickly. Our next variant of the Kodiak was actually a one-of-a-kind machine created using a salvaged Kodiak during the Word of Blake kerfuffle. The unique mech was spotted in the possession of Taisa Kale Schultz Tanaka, who was the commanding officer of the 2nd Diaron Regulars in 3077. The Regulars were granted the honor of leading the combined Ghostbear assault on the planet Diaron. After taking heavy casualties on their air assets on the drop, the 2nd Diaron Regulars pushed toward several key industrial sectors. The Word of Blake defenders fought tenaciously, and when it was clear that the Blakeists were going to lose control of the factories, they detonated several nuclear devices, wiping out a significant number of both sides in the battle. While the available sourcing doesn't specifically state that Taisa Tanaka was killed in the fight, it does say the entire command structure was killed in the nuclear detonation. As CO, that would include Tanaka and presumably his custom Kodiak. The Kale Kodiak was a mixed Innersphere and Clan Tech chassis that diverged significantly from the original. The most notable swap was to a standard 300 fusion engine, which dropped the mech's movement profile to 350. Additionally, it dropped the total number of Clan double heatsinks to 15 and added 2 more tons of armor. In the right arm, a heavy PPC was added after removing the hand actuator. This was the longest range weapon on a mech that was clearly intended to thrive in the mid and short ranges. An AC-10 autocannon was added to the right torso along with 2 tons of case-protected ammunition stored with the weapon. From here on out, things get a little bit more complicated as the left arm carries 3 Clan ER medium lasers and 2 of the Inner Sphere variety. 2 more standard medium lasers were added to the mech, 1 more into the left arm and 1 in the open head critical location. And the last 2 weapons of the loadout were 2 Clan Streak SRM-6s in the left torso with 2 tons of case-protected ammunition. As a command mech, it's not surprising that this Kodiak also carried a C3 master computer, and there was enough space left for a Beagle active probe. The Kale Kodiak is an interesting and eclectic design that harkens upon Franken-mechs of the past. I would really love to see someone kit bash this thing into existence. Now, before we move on to the last of the official Kodiak variants, we do need to take a small detour to talk about the Kodiak 2. No, not the 3063 variant we covered earlier in this video, but a completely reworked platform produced by Alshane Weapons in 3095. Constructed to be a top-of-the-line command mech, the Kodiak 2 featured a bevy of command and control features and 2.5 tons more armor than the original. The 2's primary weapons consisted of an ERPPC in the right torso and a pair of LRM-20s aided by Artemis 4 fire control systems split between the arms. An additional LRM-10 with Artemis was also added to the left torso to boost the total to 50 possible LRMs fired at once if the opportunity arose. For extremely short-range conflict de-escalation, 8 ER small lasers were split between the left and right arms. Finally, a targeting computer was added to the center torso, which improved the accuracy for the lasers and the ERPPC. It's an interesting design, though the line art for the Kodiak 2 is a bit rough to look at. I think it's because we were so spoiled by the original. There were also a couple of variants for this Kodiak 2, but each of them has an XXL engine, so I won't waste your time or mine on them. Check them out on Flex Sheets if you want to see those two travesties. He pushed his Kodiak into an ungainly run, toppling trees in his path and setting the earth trembling. Yamada had disengaged his electronic countermeasures long enough to get a radar lock and launch a missile strike, and then had re-energized ECM before Hall could reply. But he had made one critical error. Now Hall knew where he was. Hall's Kodiak burst through the tree line and stepped forward onto the dirt road. He saw the back of an Atlas pushing through the trees on the other side of the road. Hall raised both paws and poured emerald fire into the retreating mech's back. Of War and Peace and Cherry Trees, Part 2, Battlecore, page 18, by Stephen Mohan Jr. Our last official variant of the Kodiak arrived in 3131, and unlike some of the Dark Age IlClan era refits, the Kodiak 6 is actually quite restrained. The traditional 8 ER medium lasers are there, split between the arms, and the 2 Streak SRM-6s made their return to the left torso. The only change to the loadout was the swap of the ER large laser in the center torso with a medium pulse laser, and the installation of an LB-20X autocannon in the place of the UAC-20 in the right torso. To tackle the heat issues that persist on the Kodiak platform since its first version, 2 coolant pods were added to the mech, one in each arm. For the uninitiated, the coolant pod can be used to flush a mech's heat sinks with refrigerant to boost their effectiveness by 1. This makes alpha strikes with the Kodiak 6 much more viable, though that does come at the risk of an explosion should an unused coolant pod be struck with a critical hit. Overall, the Kodiak 6 is a solid performer and a viable alternative to the original UAC-20 build. I give it 4.5 plutonium frogs. Now, of course, we can't say goodbye to the Kodiak today without taking a crack at a totally unofficial and non-canon MF variant. It's conceived as a Raven Alliance variant intended to provide sturdy garrison support for settlements. Structurally, changes include the addition of 4 jump jets to push the movement profile to 464 and the upgrade in armor to 16 tons of ferrofibrous. This maxes out the mech's possible protection and still buys a couple of tons of mass for use elsewhere. The last structural tweak was the reduction of double heatsinks to 17 from the original 20. Now, it likely won't be too much of a surprise that the Kodiak MF's primary weaponry centers around a couple of very useful and terrifying plasma rifles, split between the left and right arms. Providing a consistent 10 damage and additional heat on synced targets out to 15 hexes and fed by 2 tons of ammunition apiece, the plasma weaponry can throw a wrench into the plans of even the most min-maxed of opponents. Backing up the rifles in the right torso is an advanced tactical missile 6 system, along with 3 tons of Case 2 protected ammunition. The flexibility of this launcher to fire long, medium, and powerful short-range missiles makes the Kodiak MF a consistent problem for any enemy, especially at the 12 to 15 hex zone where most of the mech's weaponry comes into play. Joining the plasma rifles in the arms were 3 medium pulse lasers to provide a consistent accurate punch in the mid and short ranges. As the Kodiak MF's only non-ammunition weaponry, these 3 are quality producers. Finally, 4 machine guns were split evenly between the left and right torsos, fed by half ton of Case 2 protected ammunition in the right torso. It never hurts to have a few of these around when clearing out infantry, providing suppressive fire, or chewing up internal bits of targets while implementing close-range conflict resolution strategies. While the Kodiak MF is a pretty ammo-dependent mech, it can still last a while without requiring resupply. 30 missile launches with the ATM-6, 20 with each plasma rifle, and 25 rounds of fire with all 4 machine guns is likely more than anyone would need in a single battle. And it's likely more than one would need in 2 battles, assuming your enemy has stuck around for a round 2. If you want to give the Kodiak MF a try, you can check the Dropbox link in the video notes below. If you do, please let me know how it performs. In a crowded field of favorite battle mechs in the universe, the Kodiak stands apart as a crowd favorite. In discussions over the past week in our Discord and on X, comments have been almost universally positive. Even one person who definitely isn't a fan of anything clan stated that the Big Bear mech deserves a lot of love. Throughout the admittedly sparse references in the lore, the Kodiak is treated with respect, even if it doesn't always win. The original loadout is incredibly powerful, if toasty warm, and there are some solid variants as you move down the timeline. Even the most recent Dawn of the IlClan era variant offers a unique take on the build and incorporates a bit of new technology. I'm looking forward to seeing the Kodiak 6 in action whenever we get some new Rosselhog Dominion fiction, hopefully very soon. What do you think about the Kodiak? Is there a variant that you think best uses the platform? Let me know in the comments and we'll keep the discussion going. Thank you as always for coming by as we talked some BattleTech. If you enjoyed the video and feel it was worthy, don't forget the thumbs up button, and even hitting subscribe will make it much more likely you'll see my nonsense in the future. For those of you who have already taken the extra step of becoming channel members or supported through Ko-fi, thank you. Without you, none of this would be possible. Until we meet again, please take care of yourself and your loved ones by making this world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.